The Dream of a Ridiculous Man by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. I am a ridiculous man. They call me mad now. This would be a step up if it was not that I remain just as ridiculous in their eyes as before. But this does not make me angry any more. Now they are all dear to me, even when they laugh at me, and at those times somehow even dearer. I would laugh with them, not at myself, but for love of them, if I did not feel so sad to watch them. Sad because they do not know the truth, and I know the truth. Oh, how heavy a weight it is to know the truth alone. But they cannot understand that. No, they cannot understand. Before, I used to be very vexed because I seemed ridiculous. Not seemed, but was. I have always been ridiculous, and I have known it almost from the day I was born. I probably knew I was ridiculous when I was 7 years old. Then I studied at school and afterwards at the university, and the more I studied, the more I learned that I was ridiculous. So that finally all my university studies went solely to prove and explain to me, the deeper I entered into them, that I was ridiculous. And exactly the same happened in my everyday life as in my studies. Year by year, the same consciousness of the ridiculous figure I cut in all circumstances developed and was strengthened in me. Everyone always laughed at me, but none of them ever knew or guessed that if ever there was a man who knew best of all that I was ridiculous, then that man was myself, and it was just this which hurt me most of all, their not realizing it, though it was my own fault. I was always so proud that I would never for the world admit this to anyone. This pride grew in me year by year, and if ever I had allowed myself to admit to anyone whatsoever that I was ridiculous, I would have blown my brains out with a revolver the same night. How I suffered during my adolescent years from the dread that I should not be able to contain myself and one day would suddenly admit it to my friends. But when I became a young man, despite the fact that I recognized my terrible quality more clearly year by year, for some reason I felt calmer. I say for some reason, because to this day I cannot understand why it was. Perhaps it was because my heart was gradually filled with a terrible depression which arose from a circumstance infinitely above me. That is, I became convinced that in this world nothing matters anywhere. I had suspected this for a long time, but the final conviction came during the last year, somehow suddenly. I suddenly felt that I did not care whether the world existed or whether there was nothing in existence anywhere. I began to perceive and to feel with my whole being that I had nothing before me. At first I kept thinking that still there had been a great deal in the past, but then I realized that there was nothing then either, that it had only seemed so. Gradually I became convinced that there would never be anything. Then I suddenly stopped being angry with people and almost ceased to notice them. Indeed, this became clear in the most trivial accidents. For instance, it would happen that I would bump into people when I walked in the streets, and not from preoccupation. What did I have to occupy me then, for I had completely ceased to think. Nothing mattered. I might have solved problems well, yet I did not solve a single one, many though they were. I did not care any longer, and the problems faded into the distance. And it was after this that I discovered the truth. I discovered the truth last November, and on precisely the 3rd of November, and from that time I can recall every second of my life. It happened on the most gloomy of all gloomy evenings. I was returning home towards 11 o'clock at night, and I remember thinking there could be no gloomier time, even from the material point of view. It had been raining all day, a cold, gloomy rain, which seemed, I remember, menacing and manifestly malignant to man, when suddenly, towards 11, it stopped, and a terrible dampness set in. It grew damper and colder than when it was raining, and everything gave off a kind of steam, each stone in the street and every mews if you gazed deep into its depths from the road. I suddenly felt that it would be a consolation if the gas went out everywhere, because with it one felt much sadder, as the gas was illuminating it all. I had hardly eaten anything at dinner that day and had sat from early evening at a young engineer's who had 2 other friends there with him. I sat silent, and I think I bored them. They were discussing something controversial and suddenly even grew heated. But I saw that they did not really care one way or the other and had grown heated for nothing. Suddenly I told them as much. But I tell you, you don't care one way or the other, so why bother? They were not offended, and they all laughed at me. This was because I said it without the least censure, and simply because I did not care myself. They saw I did not care, and it amused them. When I thought about the gas in the street, I looked up at the sky. The sky was terribly dark, but you could just distinguish torn clouds with unfathomable black stains between them. Suddenly I noticed a small star in one of these stains, and I began to gaze intently at it. That was because this star put an idea into my head. I resolved to kill myself that night. I had firmly resolved on this course 2 months before, and poor as I was, I bought an excellent revolver and loaded it the same day. But 2 months had passed, and it was still lying in a drawer. Such was my indifference that ultimately I wanted to seize a moment when I would be less indifferent. Why, I don't know. In this way, every night during the past 2 months when I returned home, I thought I would shoot myself. I kept waiting for the moment. And now the star gave me the idea, and I resolved that I would do it that night without fail. Why the star gave me this idea, I don't know.